This meeting is being recorded.
All right, Michael, I'll hand it over to you if that's okay.
Okay, well, good evening to everyone. Thank you for your participation so far. I'm looking forward to carrying on the conversations that we've had, over the last almost a year now, as we've been introducing the project to various stakeholders. First, just an introduction of myself. My name is Michael Polite. I'm the Senior VP of Beacon Communities. And so I head up a team that does work in PA, some in Ohio, and other parts of Beacon's footprint, which I'll get to in a moment. I'm joined tonight, as was stated earlier, by Jessica Sheldon. Jessica is the Vice President of Development and is the project manager who's driving the deal on a day-to-day basis. And obviously, everyone knows Jeff Campbell from our DC collaborative, who's driving our design part of the project. We've listed on this initial page some of the other partners in the deal, folks who actually performed well in other projects that we're working on. Next slide, please. So here are just a few words about Beacon in general. So this slide gives you a sense of where we're, the size of the company that is, where do we do work? We do work in 13 states and in Washington, DC, 18,000 apartment homes that are under management. Beacon manages everything it develops, and essentially everything it develops, with a very few exceptions, are actually properties that are developed and owned by Beacon. And you can see 150 communities, 700 folks work on these things every day, and then a 50-year history. Locally, on the order of 1,500 apartments are under management, 8 locations, and you all can essentially read the other pieces of data that we provided to give you a sense of what's happening in the Pittsburgh marketplace, work driven by Beacon. We do take a moment just to make clear to everyone that we are a mission-driven, for-profit development developer, and it really sort of assumes all of the work that we do. And one of the things that actually makes this different, we, as I said a moment ago, that we do manage our own everything we do. Within our management company, we have a community engagement section, which is essentially 50 people out of that 700, whose total job is to make sure that we're bringing services into our development communities so that our residents can live independently and advance some of the goals that they have for themselves, as well as making sure that our communities are healthy communities. Next slide, please. This was a slide that we put in to give an overview of our co-developer, Uptown Partners. Of course, Brittany's already given a description of what they do. So we'll, consideration of time, we'll keep it moving unless you want to say something. You good?
Nope, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, all right. So again, we'll start jumping down now to the actual development. The point of this slide is to try to give a sense of why, how did we pick this property that happened to be for sale 2 years ago. Again, we're in the affordable and mixed income development business, and we want to find opportunities where development contributes to the community redevelopment work that's underway. Will provide the residents who will live at the site, if it's a family deal, great access to job opportunities. And so there you go, the 2100 block of Fifth Avenue, very close to the second and third largest job centers in the state. It just so happens that even 2 years ago, there was a lot of discussion around the rapid bus transit system, which again was a great sort of selling point for the site, which as you know is essentially a vacant. Next. So again, these are some of the selling points of why develop at this location. Next slide, please. This starts to get into some of the detail of what's actually in the 51 unit development. Excuse me, you can see that it's a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments. To the right there, we actually give you a sense of what the rents will be for those apartments. And we give a sense of the size. So 31 ones, 9 twos, and 11 threes. Who's going to live in those apartments? Within the threes, they're all set aside for what we're calling, well, within the affordable range, that is actually a deep subsidy at affordable workforce is actually shorthand for 50 to 60% of the area median. So obviously that number varies as you change in apartment size. So we literally just describe it as workforce. We're telling you what the maximum rent is. Those of you who have been around for a while, you know that these low-income housing tax credit programs have controlled rents. So there's essentially a formula you put things through, and these numbers document what those numbers produce. The next run down would tell you what the income range is. So we're trying to be as transparent as possible so that folks understand who's eligible to live once the property is developed. Below that, Jessica's documented who are potential workers. What are the types of things that people will do and be eligible? And we document that for you there. I'll need to read it for you. Going back to the left, the circle is meant to document what is the income mix in the property. So 22% or 11 of the 51 apartments will be without controls, so unrestricted market. And then 17 of them are these deeply affordable, so a third. And then the remainder, the majority, are actually in that 50 to 60% of their immediate. So we're trying to respond to the entirety of the community of folks who would want to live at this location. The last bullet point under here is the employment commitment. Again, we documented that we committed to a minimum of 25% MBE, 10% WBE, and there's our goal of 30 and 15. All a part of this is essentially the exact same presentation we made at the second round of the DRP process, and then again when we presented to the community. Next slide, please. This is a quickie. We've essentially documented, you know, which of the RCOs have stake in reviewing. You know, we've met with obviously the Hill CDC. I think we met with the collaborative, and obviously we've met with the Uptown partners group at least once with significant information being made available. So we, you know, there's nothing to hide. We're very proud of what we're doing. We think we're responding to the expectations and needs in the neighborhood. If there's someone that we haven't met with, absolutely open to having a presentation with them, because we think the more people we know, we'll have a wider base of folks who would, one, support, and two, look forward to the ultimate development we're talking about. Next slide, please. So a lot of blocks on this one. The point of this is to document where we've been in the initial slide, that top row there. I'm saying, in June of 2022, we met with urban partners to talk about our interests after we had secured site control of the property and started to develop a concept that we would share with the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency later on in June. Obviously, the June 6th would have been the first time meeting with board members or a review committee. We wouldn't show up to the staff saying in 2 weeks an application. And then you can see later on in September, the initial DRP presentation. In October of 2022, the District Collaborative, etc. You can see what happened in 2022. In 2023, and in February, another session with the Uptown Partners Real Estate Review Committee. And then there's, again, you can see in March, we met with the Hill CDC, meeting number 3. Essentially, we completed the process, the DCRP process. I think literally, I know today we had a presentation with city planning's conceptual design advisory panel. And then we're in the middle of our DAM here. We're looking forward to moving on to the Planning Commission in July. And then as far as the financing goes, because we've received our financing tool from PHFA, it calls for us to submit a package that does not, the design package, updated construction costs, updated financing, all of that will go in at the end of July, at the very beginning of August. We're working hard to make financing closing come together in 2023. I believe sometime late, not too late in the fourth quarter, but we'll keep pushing, and sometimes it requires closing it at the end of the year. And then I believe we have a 14 or 16 month construction period, which puts us teases us up so that we'll have housing coming online in 2025. So I was moving quick so that we can leave a lot of time for Jeff. I think you're up next, right, Jeff?
Yeah, I'd be happy to take it from here. Thank you. So my name is Jeff Campbell. I'm a principal and architect with Rothschild Doina Collaboratives. We've done a number of projects, been around for 34 years in the city. We're based in the Strip District. Done a number of projects within the Hill as well. Worked on the Dinwiddie townhomes, worked on the Legacy, as well as several other projects. I did just want to reinforce one thing that Michael had spoken to, and that is this whole DAM process. There isn't a requirement that the developer meet with teams beforehand, before this DAM, but I think I want to just acknowledge the effort that Beacon's done to reach out. I believe that somebody from the Beacon team has reached out to each community group at some point, and we set up meetings when appropriate, and done a full-bodied process. And part of that was actually before we were even funded. So, that was a little bit more of a risk on Beacon's part, where they were actually committing to meeting before we had received full funding. But we are at that point now. And so I will go through the actual designs here and give everybody a sense of what we're proposing. So the first is the actual site location. So right here, you can see in the red lines, this is where the site is located. It's actually an in-block site, so it doesn't go around a corner or anything like that. It goes from an existing building to another existing building. There are 2 existing buildings on site that currently are vacant and in pretty bad shape. We did look at trying to save those, but it wasn't feasible. And I think we recognize that that's been something we've heard from the community, and it was something we wanted to try, or wanted to make our best efforts to, but we just found it was not feasible to save those particular two. Another thing to point out here is the change in grade. So we actually have an 18-foot grade change from what's on the page here, the right corner to the lower left-hand corner. So it's 18 feet of fall. It makes for some challenging design sometimes. You know, I'm from Illinois originally, and the flat sites can be much easier sometimes to put a building on. Another thing to point out is we are right along Fifth Avenue. So, you know, Fifth Avenue right now, Fifth Avenue goes in downtown. Currently, there is a bus lane that comes out of town. Right now, the BRT route, which you know, recently announced it is fully funded and is moving forward, is actually going to be proposed to come right down the street. All the traffic will be moving inbound along Fifth. And one thing I wanted to point out in this upper right-hand diagram, you can see currently there's the sidewalk, there's our site, then the sidewalk, then the bus route, then car, and then parking. One of the things that is frankly great for this particular project is that they're flipping some of that around, so that there's going to be the site, then the sidewalk, then a bike lane, then trees and a landscaping strip, and then a parking, and then cars and buses. And so I know we're excited because one of the things you'll see is that we have a public space on Fifth Avenue, and it just gives a little bit of buffer and safety between the noise of cars and such. So we're excited about that. And then I'll go through the next few of these just relatively quickly, but you know, this is a perspective from the Boulevard of the Allies. So our site is actually right here, so you will be able to see it. I think it's something we're pretty aware of, that this will be somewhat representative of Uptown to people that are driving by. And then this is a view back the other direction. I think, again, you can kind of see, you know, where you can see it from the bridge, from Boulevard of the Allies, as well as getting some nice views off in the distance from the building itself. And one of the strong things we heard from the community was really making sure we were being sensitive to the context. So our initial design was actually a 5-story building. It had you know, a lot of white and some colors that aren't typically found in Uptown. And so, you know, one of the things we really heard was we wanted to rely heavily on the context. So, you know, as we tend to do, we did go through, we studied a lot of the precedents. So all these buildings here are in the block just to the west, the downtown side from the site. These are all 3-story residences, and there's things like details and colors and window patterns and things like that that we really tried to lean on as we prepared our design. And then opposite the street from those buildings, there's some taller buildings as well, some 4-story buildings, and they are characterized by you know, these big, strong bases that are 1-story and historical retail. The 4th floor is typically differentiated from the lower floors by a strong cornice or something along those lines. So those were all things that we wanted to carry as well. And then this is a conceptual diagram, but wanted to put it in front of everybody so they could understand why we ended up with the building massing like we did. So this again is, if you remember that initial view, this is Fifth Avenue along here. One of the things that we really wanted to do, and actually this came directly for some feedback we got in one of our community meetings, was make sure that we had a 3-story facade at the street level. We were really trying to figure out where the best place to put the green space was in this, whether it was in the back in Watson, which is, you know, very thin street, or something much more public. And I think we felt like we really wanted to make sure that we had a public space in the front. We had our community room in the front and offices, so that there'd be great occupancy there at Fifth Avenue, you know, not just for the building, but just as the neighborhood too. You can see the building being fully occupied as you came in. But we didn't want to go all the way because we did want to meet the street and meet the context. So one of the things we really wanted to try hard to do was to keep a 3-story facade up at the front. Also wanted to make sure we were keeping with the massing patterns that were throughout the neighborhood. So you'll see we really tried to break down the scale of that building. Also conscious of, from a distance, the corner here was going to be more visible. So we wanted to make sure we put a little bit of energy into that. And then, you know, obviously there is going to be a big focal point as you come up the street as well. So this is the front elevation of what we're proposing at this point. I think hopefully you'll recognize the brick and the colors that you've seen in some of the context, and of course throughout the neighborhood. We tried to keep those window patterns as similar as we could. We actually put in some additional details on the facade that actually comes up to meet the street. It's just a little more detail to give it a little bit more of a relationship to some of those existing buildings. You can also see the front yard space that we're proposing. We think the community room that's right here and the entry to the building is right through this canopy. We feel like this will be a great, a very successful space, and it'll be a nice sense of privacy in that it is a private space, but still a very public one as well, so that there's still interaction between the park and the space itself. Another thing to point out really quickly is we're starting to show that BRT and that separation. So you can see here, this is that planting strip and where the trees would be. And then there is on-street parking that will be proposed along the street right here. And then when we move to the rear elevation, one of the big things to note is that we actually moved from a 4-story facade on 5th to a 5-story facade in the back. And that's because of this 18-foot grade difference. So we really need to make sure that we're adding another floor as we came to the back. We also feel like there's a lot of, from a safety and security standpoint, it does provide eyes on Watson. So you do get a lot of units that face out onto that, into that direction, which, enhances the safety and security of the space. And then I think the other thing that hopefully comes across from this page is how packed we are in the back of the site. I believe when we originally started this, we had 2 parking spaces. I think as Michael spoke to, we're really, we think that this is going to be a very public transportation heavy site based on where it is along the BRT. Right now, I think I said we have 3 regular spaces and then 1 accessible space. But we've also got a lot of requirements here as far as trash and transformers and generators. Things like that are also eating up a lot of the space, as well as just trying to meet the grade as it crosses, as the slopes come across the site. And then here, this is a site plan where on the top of the page is 5th Avenue. So here you can see that front lawn and the main entry. And then the back, you can see these parking spaces, the trash loading area. Wanted to make sure the trash was screened. We do think we'll be able to get a nice smaller recreation space in the back here as well. There's a little bit of, these trees are actually up a little bit of a slope. So there's about 6 feet or so that goes up to the street behind us. And then just to give a sense of the material pages or materials that we're thinking of, we mentioned the brick. So there is going to be a lot of brick along the, we're doing 3 stories of brick on the whole front facade. We have a running bond that will also be towards the base, again, kind of relating to some of the nature of the buildings that you see currently have that stronger base and a different color there. We are planning on using high quality fiber cement lap siding, so not vinyl, but the stuff that we think will last and has proven to last the test of time. And then at the very top, in order to give it a little more differentiation, we're proposing a vertical siding there. And then at the corner element, that corner tower, we're proposing a Nichiha, which is a fiber cement panel that you can really have a lot of flexibility with colors. So I think we're excited about starting to play with that. And then just a few more views here to, again, try to understand this is what it would feel like more from that street level. So you can see, again, that connection to the public space in the front, and then hopefully how we've, made efforts to break down the scale of the building into something that's more in keeping with the size and massing of the neighborhood. And then overall, this is just an aerial perspective from up above the Birmingham Bridge. This gives you a sense of how, how that building scale fits into the community. And I think, it is 4 on one side, 5 on another, but it relates pretty strongly, I think, to some of the existing apartments and other buildings that you see throughout the neighborhood. I think it'll fit in well. And then, I did want to take a moment just to acknowledge we are in an eco-innovation district. So for those of you that don't know, this is Uptown has zoned this as a very aspirational, in a very aspirational way, and really tried to promote sustainability. That's something that we've embraced full-throatedly. So we are proposing that this be passive house, which is probably the most one of the most aggressive sustainability programs that's out there. Basically, you're using the existing electricity of the building and the body heat that people generate to heat the building. So I'd be happy to go into some of those details, but I just wanted to kind of acknowledge that we are hitting this high standard. And then I just, we threw in some floor plans here in case people had questions about it. I don't think we really need to go into that much detail on it, but again, here you can kind of see that community room and offices up along the street level. On the ground floor, we are proposing amenities like a fitness room. There's going to be a pet wash. We do have bike storage, knowing that, we are along some bike lanes, so we'll have some interior bike storage, trash chute, items like that. And then wrapping up here, these are just second and third floors, which I'd be happy to go back to if there's any questions or comments regarding those. So that's the presentation. I'd be happy to hear thoughts and comments.
So we don't currently have any questions in the Q&A. No raised hands. Does anyone have any questions?
I have a comment, I guess.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
We can. Yeah.
Okay. So Jeff, you stated that you don't have to talk to every RCO, which I understand. And the consensus group did make kind of an agreement with Uptown partners that we would be supportive of the projects that are more Uptown related. But being that you kind of had conversations with every other RCO, it's a little dismissive of the consensus group, right, to not have reached out directly. And just so that you understand, the RCO process is designed so that by the time that you get to city planning, there's not opposition. I know you've been in this game for quite some time, and many years ago, city planning hearings would last hours and hours and hours with groups coming out to oppose and be oppositional, 125 people saying hell no. And so the RCO process is to avoid all of that. So I would just suggest, because I expected you and Mr. Polite, whose name I've heard before, will be back before us at some other time, or you may need a letter of support for something or a variance or something else, that you may just want to make sure that you just do that little, tip of the cap to all the organizations, just in case you need support or you need to counter potential opposition at some other point in the game. But it sounds like I would say that, given the level of affordability, given the green components that you have of the project, also, given some of the confusion because the consensus group was a participant on the DRP process, it's understandable why there might have been some, challenges there. But just wanted to say that.
Yeah, if I could just respond really quickly, I appreciate that. And I think we do, we really do strive to reach out to everybody, because I think the city has really created an open public process. It sounds like there may have been a little miscommunication, because I think, it's my understanding that we actually did reach out to the consensus group as well. But, and I'd be happy to do so in the future too, if there's others that need to hear this presentation.
I also want to add as well too, because my comments were similar from the consensus group, and also there is the Shenley Heights organization, or 5 recognized community organizations, and many of us are trying to keep a whole picture of the Hill District, because we believe that everything could potentially affect other parts in positive ways and also in negative ways as well. So that's really kind of surprising that because other groups have reached out to all of the RCOs, at least to make that contact and let us know we're here. So that's a little bit surprising. So again, I'm of the belief that you know, building more housing. You know, this is a up and coming area. We know it's very inviting to developers. We understand that, but I'm of the belief that we need housing built in this city, and that housing in that area can potentially take pressure off of the areas of the Hill District that we are most protective of. And so my final comment that I have to say is I was on the East Busway this afternoon, coming from downtown back to my part in East Liberty. And you see these, and I'm gonna be very honest with you, they are not appealing. I think that we as community organizations have to really emphasize the historic architecture of the Hill. We need to try to protect every historic building that we have. So I'm always disappointed to hear we lose a historic building. But Mr. Campbell, I think you should, I think you have to be more upfront, because these buildings look the same as the buildings here in East Liberty, the buildings in Lawrenceville, the buildings in La Crosse, Wisconsin, the buildings in Abilene, Texas. And we really have to begin to push back. We know that it's the cheapest form of housing that can be built. We know people are trying to save dollars, but at least the last developer we talked to was trying to put some art or something on the buildings to kind of differentiate them from all these buildings everywhere else. So this looks exactly the same. I heard what she said. It's hard for me to accept it, but because these looked exactly the way all these buildings look. And like you said, we're trying to make the Hill District a destination. And one thing it should be appealing that we should really be emphasizing is our wonderful historic buildings that we have. And when new development comes, we want it to truly complement what we already have here. And I'm just saying, as future goes on, I think we as community organizations should always push back on some of these designs that can potentially make our communities look like an airport. And that's what we say in housing justice, that we don't want our communities to look like airports, particularly communities like Pittsburgh, who has very distinct architecture from community to community. So that was my comment. And as Bonnie said, we try to show deference to Uptown partners.
Thank you. I appreciate those comments. You know, I will say that Pittsburgh's rich architecture is the reason I'm here. And, you know, I think this is something that we really do try to strive and protect as much as we can, and wanted to make sure that we were respecting a lot of the context to the greatest extent that we could, and make it feasible. Just as a small point, I did just had a little text back and forth here. I heard that we did actually reach out back in March of last year, and that Carol had said that basically that the group would piggyback onto the other meetings here. So again, you know, any non-communication was not intentional at all.
Bill, let me see your hand.
Hi. Yes, just a clarifying question for the developers. A majority of the units here are going to be designated as affordable, and so we just wanted any clarification on if there is a termination or expiration date on the affordability for the units.
Sure. So the property will have a 40-year compliance period. That is, the income standards or income categories we described are in place for at least 40 years.
Thank you very much.
All right, I'm not seeing any more hands. I think we are out of questions. All right. Thank you for your time this evening. And I think that concludes the end of our development activities meeting. And you have a good evening.
Thanks, everybody. Have a nice evening.
Thank you all for your
Thank you very
time.
much.
Good night.